Have you ever wondered how VTube models work? Now, you probably are thinking, the webcam controls the model. That's true, but I mean, like, how though? And you're probably going to think, well, the program handles it, and that's also true. But what I mean is, how do VTube models look so real? Now, I'm not talking about how the art is. I'm talking about its ability to look up, look down, look left, look right. How can a VTube model achieve all that? Well, many people would say that making a VTube model is incredibly difficult, but in truth, it's actually very easy. In fact, the big problem here is that for most people who are creating their first VTube model and animating it, they have no clue how the VTube model works in the first place. That's actually 80 to 90% of the difficulty. In fact, it would be more akin to saying that you are trying to create a piece of furniture with all the blueprints, but it doesn't tell you what it looks like beforehand or afterwards, so you don't know what you're making. And so it falls to me to rescue you all from this lack of understanding and teach you all how VTube models actually work. Hello everyone, I'm Darius, VTube model maker, animator, streamer, and content creator. Now I also have other videos about VTubing and will have more in the future, so if you enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, or comment about what kind of content you would like to see in the next video. Now, before we go any further, I'd like to clarify what we're going to be talking about. First, we're going to talk more broadly and simply about how the VTube models work and generally narrow it down until it's something that everyone can kind of understand a bit more easily. Then we're going to talk about how to make a VTube model easily. Now, we're not going to say what to do, it's how to do it. It's the foundational understanding of kind of the approaches to go and just give you kind of a general understanding of how it's done. We're going to talk about the art, the animation, a little bit about the tracking, and finally some tips and tricks to make VTube model making a lot easier. So how do those VTube models work? That's the big question everyone's asking. If you were actually going to get an answer from somebody that was, well, proper, detailed, and quick, it would be that the art file has all the parts separated so we can move them around in the animation program to create the animations, and the tracking software uses the web camera to look at your head and turn your movements into controls. Yeah, that's actually how it works, but there's more to it than that. So this is the finer details of how live 2D models manage to pull off what they do. First off, with the art file, all the parts are indeed separated to make animations, but we also have hidden parts, things that are behind other parts to be revealed when some move out of the way. In other words, you have the inner mouth and all the parts, and the lips move away to show the inner mouth. Now, the animation portion is where most of the work is done. What the animation program does is allows us to give a structure to these art parts. In other words, kind of like a 2D polygon set. This allows us to move and warp and deform and basically mold the parts as we want to. So the model is generally looking straight forward without any expression, and we're able to do things like mold smiles and curve the mouth and things like that. So the way the animation program basically works is you are creating the end poses of these short animations we call parameters. So like you use a keyframe, which is pretty much like a checkpoint, and between these two keyframes, any changes you have, the program will figure out in between. So you move a part to the side to kind of look like your head's moving and stuff. So when I do my turn head to the side kind of pose, I am mostly only making this single pose, and the program figures out this area in between. So I take all the parts and I mold them into this shape. I move them around, I make them look like they're going to the side, and that's how we create these animations to the side. We're actually doing nothing more than a bit of artistic molding and stuff. So the animation program is a completely different art style than being able to just draw it. You're just taking what's already there and making it look like it's looking to the side. The program figuring out in between makes it look great. Now, the parameters are all short animations, so they all stack together. So you have a lot of these small animations, and that gives us this really fluid look. On top of that, if you have like a up, down, left, right kind of animation sequence, we tag those together. We pin them together, keyframe the parts that are working in one to the other, and instead of just, straight like this, we create corners as well with it with the help of the program. We edit that, and now we have a grid-like assistant. So that creates a circular motion. On top of that, we have extra animations that are physics animations. They activate, based with the physics part of the program, to activate whenever another animation is done. So depending on how like jerky the animation is, like my head going down, the robes have an animation sequence for down and up, left and right. Kind of they bounce a little. So if I move my head just a little bit, you can kind of see it. If I do slow, it doesn't really happen. If I do it jerky, you can see a lot of physics with the robe that way, because I set physics to that. And that can be set to hair and things like that, but that's how VTube models work. Now on top of all this, we have the tracking software, and the way the tracking software works with that is essentially it's just one for one. Basically, if your model's looking to the left and you have your controller, your web camera detecting your face, moving the side like that, it's a one-for-one trade-off, and that creates the realism. We just basically tie in a lot of animations to these animations that we're tracking so well, and that's how it works. Now, as far as like the complicated mouth like I have, that is because you can detect a lot more mouth movements with the iPhone and the ARKit kit and something called VBridger. You can look that up yourself if you want to learn how it works, but it's basically just hooking in more detectable facial shapes to allow me to have more realistic mouth. And that's how VTube models work. But let's talk more about the in-depth on the art and the animation, so you guys kind of understand the process we take to get to this. All right, so the art. This is the most important part of the model, obviously, because it cannot exist without it. So let's get started on this. So the model itself must be created with a forward-facing appearance, deadpan look, neutral face, like an awkward school photo. Now, that might seem like a strange thing, but that's where you get all the animation from and everything. It doesn't look to the side, it doesn't smile, it doesn't cock its head to the side. It's straightforward neutral. Now that's not necessary to have, but it's the best practice because symmetry is a lot easier to animate. You can start at the side if you want, if you're insane. I'm crazy and I didn't do it. Seriously, it would be so hard to do. Trying to do things at angles and dynamic angles is possible, but you're not going to have as much range to work with. It's better to start neutral and animate that angle in afterwards, because then you're working with something straight and symmetrical and it's easier to work with. Now, all the parts will in fact be separated, but what tells you what parts need to be separated for these models? Well, it's any part that moves independently of something else. So a shadow might be independent from the other layers and stuff like that, because it's hard to animate them when they're connected as one single art file, when they're moving at different rates. We call this parallax. It's when one thing moves at a different rate or direction from the other things, and it gives you a lot more realism and stuff. But it's going to be looking straightforward, neutral, deadpan. And the reason is because it's easier to, like, let's say your lips are straightforward, it's just straight. Completely straight. It's easier to make a straight lip into a curved lip than a curved lip into a straight lip. Now that's just going to be like the bottom and the top that really need to be mostly straight. You have like the texture and the other effects on the lips on top of it, and also the lips will have flesh as well. We're going to get that right now too. So the lips and the eyes are, well, you actually make the inner bits too. So the inner mouth and the entire eye are also created as separate like parts of the model. This is so that the eyelids and the lips will actually reveal it inside when they move around. So you basically are creating the inner mouth and the inner eyes, and you open the lips, open the eyes to reveal underneath, and that creates a lot more realism. So that's why you have the inner mouth, the teeth, the top teeth, the bottom teeth, all that separated so that you can move them around independently. And in the end, it looks really great like that. Now you also have with your model, everything needs to be a flat color. The reason being is that you'll have the textures on top, and you can kind of mold parts together that have the same texture, color kind of thing. So like the lips actually have, well, the skin flesh color, just like the face. So they mold into the face perfectly. If they're a flat color and the textures on top, you can mold them together without any issue or lines and stuff like that. So the eyelids and the lips will have a little bit of flesh color around them so they can mold into the face like that. And that's how the model's art is done. But it's just straightforward. And even though you have like this more animated look to the side, you're actually doing that kind of art in the animation program by squishing and stretching and molding the facial like parts around the stuff, moving them separately, making them squish separately or together, depending on what parts we're working on, how it is. It's all a nuance to it, but any part that is a lot more separated from the others will need to be separated. So your neck, any shadows, your face, top eyelid, bottom eyelid, eyeball, maybe your iris if you're trying to make it enlarge or shrink for various other animations and stuff. Top lips, top teeth, bottom teeth, inner mouth, things like that. The hair itself could be a lot of parts too, depending on how you want the hair to flow against each other or move. So anything that's moving separately will need to be different. Now, you can also kind of move parts that are part of the same thing, but it's a little harder. So if you really want those strong, going against the flow kind of animations, it's a lot better to keep them separated. And you can always kind of connect them together later if you're going to just, you know, decide differently. But that's basically how the art works. It's just straightforward, neutral, and all the parts that are going to move differently. So on to the animation. Believe it or not, the animation is actually where most of the new art is done. The animation is the heart and everything about VTube models. I mean, while the model art is what really starts it off and makes it look good from the get-go, the animation is what makes it come alive. And more work is done in the animation than the art. Because while the art is something to work with, you then have to, well, perform magical surgery on it in the animation. Now that sounds a little bit intimidating, but it's not, because you get to pick how severe or mild you do all this stuff. Trust me, it can be very, very easy. So anyways, when you upload your model file into the animation program, it turns all those layers into parts. Parts you can work with, move around, and select as individual pieces of the model. So they do not come with the structure, the art mesh, and you have to add that art mesh in. Now that does not mean you have to do it manually, though you can for the experts who are really finicky, but most of us just use the art mesh generator, and it is wonderful 99% of the time, so don't worry about it. You can pick how light or heavy you want it. Lighter is, if you're not going to move it a lot, lighter's better because it's less load on the model and the program, but don't worry about it too much. You're going to want heavier loads on things that are much more detailed and bending and warping and stuff, like your eyes, your eyepieces, your mouth, your lips, things like that, things that move a lot. But your teeth don't move a lot. You might need light for them instead of heavy, unless you're doing some crazy sideways movement. You know how it goes. If it's really, really intensely like molded, you're going to want more than less, but it's not a big deal for most parts of your model. You don't really need more than medium for most stuff, and that's kind of what we generally go for. Now, when you're doing your animations, you have to set everything up. So the art meshes themselves can be tied to parameters, and parameters are the animation sets. So parameter would be like 3 keyframes and 2 keyframes. For those that don't know, a keyframe is like a checkpoint. Basically, you have 2 keyframes set, and if one's different from the other, it causes the program to figure out the movement between it. So you're moving the pieces to one side for like looking to the left. I move all my pieces to the left. I made this pose as a keyframe. So the program figures out between this and this, and that gives you that movement in between. That's just how it works, right? So you set usually the center keyframe is just the neutral dead pose kind of look. It's just looking normal with no animations added to it whatsoever. It's just your standard basic model appearance when you have it from the upload from the file and stuff, right? So with the 3 keyframe parameters, you generally have like a left to right approach or an up to down. And for a lot of these, this is reflectable. In other words, we can actually mirror the animation from one side to another if it's very symmetrically done. So if I was animating one eye at a time when I were moving these parts around and stuff, instead of doing a sort of large movement with both eyes so I can keep it centered, then it wouldn't reflect as well, and I'd have to reflect from one eye to the other eye. It's a little bit more of a process you can look up, but that's how it can work. You can actually reflect one parameter set to the other, but they have to be symmetrical. So if one eye's a little upsided, you got a problem. But for the most part, if you use broader forms of animation, you can reflect them entirely. And I'm going to talk about that now too. So warp deformers. Warp deformers are the most important thing that you're going to need to know about with animation. Warp deformers is like throwing on a flat, square art mesh layer on top of your model. Or your piece, I should say. Your art pieces will have these deformers thrown on. You can put more than one piece in there, so you can deform them all together as a unit. So the big important thing to know about parameters and deformers and these art meshes is you generally will only have up to 2 parameters linked to a single art mesh or deformer. And there's a reason for that. So when you link more than one parameter to a deformer, your keyframes are exponential instead of additive. If you have 3 keyframes in 2 parameters and they're linked together with the same deformers and stuff, doing both of them and stuff, you get a grid pattern instead of 2 linear patterns. Linear being just like, 1, 2, 3, ABC. The grid pattern would then be like 1 ABC, 2 ABC, and 3 ABC. So they're all interlinked and held together that way. Now, the whole thing about that grid pattern being like 9 points is like, well, it's like 8 directions and center. So what you get as a result is a circle. And so the program is figuring out all the points between these animations when you have that grid pattern, and that gives you a very fluid circular motion. Now, these warp deformers can have other warp deformers put into them. That's because in the animation program, the animations stack. So I have a deformer for my mouth. You can see my mouth moving when I move the side, but I also have a lot of deformers and links and stuff and animation sets to the parameters for my mouth talking. So you can see all these movements, all these things going on, and they're all underneath the deformer for my mouth moving to the side with the side animation deformer. So as a result, they're just being deformed in that squishing, making it look like my mouth is going towards the side kind of deformation. It's squishing it to the side to make it look like it's doing that. But because I have a straightforward animation set, I'm looking straight forward when I'm animating the mouth, but that whole set is getting squished with everything else, so it has a quite good side animation as a result. So that kind of is something that works. Then you got like the head movement too is also stacked, so I can do even more strange and unique movements. But each one of those is just a different, unique, simple parameter. The whole head to the side thing, that's a simple parameter. I just happen to have the hood animated kind of differently, so that gives a much more isolated approach. This is something we call parallax. Parallax is where things move at different rates, different positions, different speeds based on the front, back, different speeds, they cross in different directions. Basically, it gives a flow of movement in multiple directions to make things look realistic. So if you have a lot of pieces individually animated and stuff, it works great that way. So you have your warp deformers and you have parameters. and make sure the parameters, generally 3 keyframes is side to side or up and down. You know, there's one way to another way. Whereas 2 keyframes is, you know, like closed and open. It's one or the other. It's eye closed, eye open, etc. So there's not a lot to worry about with parameters. You're just doing simple animations. But the way to understand how all this works is just that they stack. You're doing them one at a time, and the bigger movements that carry everything is what everything is under. You basically throw your art meshes into a deformer, and that deformer can be deforming them on their own. You won't do the animations with the under parts on their own. So, like, how to put this? So, if I am animating my mouth, I'm animating my mouth looking forward. If I'm animating my head going to the side, I'm just animating my head going to the side. Same with up. Same with rotating to the side. There's no trying to do this weird angle and everything going at once. That's confusing. That's complicated. We are complex, not complicated. Complex means we're taking small steps, but there's a lot of steps. In the end, a model can be made very simply. You only have to do a little bit of head movement, a little bit of head up, down like this, and you don't have a lot of movement you're putting into the model. Now, if I do my head to the side, I've done a lot with the mask, but if I only had to do a little bit, that's easy. But doing a lot is difficult, and I haven't pushed my head as far as I can because it's my first model. So you have parameters, you have deformers, and you have art meshes. Those are the big 3 when it comes to making your model. But the way these keyframes works is just that between one keyframe and the other, the program is just going to move the parts to where you set it. So you are just creating the pose for that keyframe animation. And because they're so small and simple animations, when they link up together, they form a full complex model. Now, the other thing to know about with animation is physics. Physics seems intimidating, doesn't it? It's not. Physics is just like extra animations that you have that trigger when you're doing animation. So like if your hair would move, if your head was moving. So you would just create the hair wiggling left to right and up to down with certain animation sets so that when that happens, the program basically takes the animation set you have for the physics and applies kind of a bounce effect to it, just going forward and bouncing back. So when you have up and down, left and right to it, it gets more of a 360 kind of approach to it. But you just create these animations and let the program decide. And you it's a little bit of a difficult thing to explain, as you can tell. But for the most part, you're just using animations you set purely for the physics. This is how this bounces, works, moves, etc. when another animation happens. For example, when I throw my head down forward, you will see my hood move. Now, if I do it faster, that's because I set it to physics. So the speed at which I throw my head down will cause the hood to be more basically spongy and rubber banding and stuff. It goes and gives more because I'm moving faster. If I move slower, it's simpler. And you can set a lot of this stuff with the physics program, part of the animation program and everything else, but it's not that difficult. It's not even something you really have to have physical knowledge on or anything else. It's just kind of a give and try out, kind of take and give kind of experience. You just need to test it and stuff, figure out what works better, what doesn't work better, but just understand that's how the physics works with the model. They're done separately with their own animation set. So you've got to add your own parameters for the animations for the physics. So if you've got a lot of hair pieces, you're going to need physics for each one, or you can have them all interact on their own on that same physical plane. So you can have each one have a deformer above them and have it move the hair to the side, and they all do it at the same time. Now, if they're independent and different, you can you can play around the weight for like a large strand of hair versus a short strand of hair, etc. So it can be very interesting to work with it that way. But that's just how physics works. You can pick whether you want to do everything at once or one bit at a time or everything, and some get their own little unique pieces. You get to pick how the model works itself. Now, another thing with animation to know is shadows. Shadows are generally just tied into the bigger animations, deformers and stuff. So like a lot of head movement deformers I have for my chin shadow shape. Now I have the opacity set for that because I installed it with minimal opacity to it. So you might be tempted to add in your models like shadows with like the correct opacity, but make it a little darker for the shadows, a little brighter and less opacity for any lighting you're going to add in that should move around on your model, because you can add the opacity in the program. You can't make things darker. You're going to have to make things lighter and more see-through. So save it for the animation program for a lot of this work. But other than like shadows and physics being more advanced, there's other techniques and stuff you can learn with it. But that's how the models work. You keyframe in everything and it should, well, fit in. And you move from one keyframe to the other to create an animation set. All right, let's talk about how to make your first model easily. Now that may sound like, well, yeah, it sounds like a pretty heavy claim, right? But, well, there's a simple way about that I'm going to explain now. It's about pulling back your scope. In other words, doing things easier that you feel more comfortable doing rather than trying to make it like everybody else. Do you really need hair? You can wear a helmet or a mask or a hat or something to cover up certain parts of the body. You don't have to do eyes, put on some sunglasses. You don't need to have a mouth, give a flu mask on. These are simple techniques to overcome things you're less comfortable with. You don't have to do it. You can make a machine, a robot, any kind of unorthodox kind of character, because you have command on making your model the way you want to. There's all sorts of things you can do to get around the parts you don't want to do. You don't have to animate it that much. You don't have to go all range with left, right, up, down. You know, you can just have a little bit in the front. You don't have to crack your head all the way to the side. You can just have a little bit jiggling stuff going on. You don't have to add a lot of physics either. Physics are easy to add, but you can always add them later. The bestest thing I could tell you to do with this is to make your model modular. In other words, try to make your model something that you can come back to work on, to fix, to improve later. Add that extra detail or shading or lighting to it. You can still improve the model later, especially because you be making the model yourself. That means you have the power to do less now and more later. Another thing to do is to understand that even if your model doesn't look great, try animating it. Everything looks so much better in motion, and the human mind will forgive a lot more when it sees things in motion. The more things in motion, the more it just goes, it's probably close enough. As well as the fact you might find out that you're better at modifying the art in the animation program than drawing the art. Like me, I can't draw. I've proven this time and time again, and I'll talk about why I can draw things like this occasionally later, but I can't draw. I hate it. It takes me days to do what takes some people seconds to do. But when it comes to animating, oh, that's where I have a good time. I feel like I can do a lot better than other people at it, push things further, do all sorts of crazy things, doctor up the model, add in parts and patches and connect colors. There's some crazy things I've had to do for people's models before. But anyways, what I'm trying to say here is that you don't have to have a lot of talent to make a good VTube model. You just have to do it. Find out your own ways to do it. Just scale back until you feel comfortable doing it and try. Once you have a design going with the model parts, the animating can be quite easy. You're making short animations, not long ones. They are simple and you can just do a little bit to give the idea that you're actually there. And that's all you really have to do. You don't have to push the model or do too much. A little bit of work makes it just look alive. And that's what you should focus on. And that's really just how it is to make a model easily. You're just getting the design out there and animating, because you don't have to do a lot. You just have to do a little bit and make it in a way that you are prepared to improve in the future, or, well, go with 2.0. Your first model will not be your best. It might be good for whatever reason or whatnot, but in the end, you're going to want to improve later. So always remember, you will get all the skills you need to improve it after you finish it. So leave a little wiggle room for improvement later. But that's all I can really say about how to make it easily, because, well, in the end, it's about doing it. But remember, models are complex, not complicated. This means you have a lot of little parts, not a bunch of parts that are like intertangled with each other and force it to have problems and issues. You don't need to get stuck on anything. Just start building it one piece at a time and your model will get done. Well, everyone, I hope this video has helped you understand a bit more about how VTube models work. And for those who are starting off on their first model, I hope this makes it a lot easier for you guys, as well as remove some of the insecurities with the difficulties of making your first model. I put a lot of work into this video, so I hope it was as concise and helpful as possible, so let me know if I did a good job on that. As well, if you have any questions or want to see specific content or me to cover certain parts of the model making process or anything, be sure to leave a comment. I would love to see your ideas or hear what you guys want to see in future videos. Now, if you also enjoy this content, feel free to, well, leave a like, subscribe, all that stuff. Notification bell, blah, 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 content creator stuff. I also do streaming and other things, so if you enjoy hearing my voice and want to hear me yelling at people or other things, check me out then. Every Monday, Tuesday, Friday, 6 Central? Yeah, that's it. So anyways, everyone, I have spent a lot of time on this video, so I am very appreciative of all you who have watched the video until this point. You're my favorite viewer. But all good things must come to an end, and we must part today. So I will see you all in the next video. So until next time.